Right, so in this video we are going to finally connect to the database from within our Laravel application. So if you have the setup that I recommend, so using Docker to locally run MySQL, you can go to this URL and you should see adminer script from which we will be able to connect to the database to see if everything works correctly. But remember that you can use any database client that you prefer. If you like, you can use Table Plus or MySQL Workbench, whatever works for you. So our server would be MySQL, the username is root, and the password is root. So you should be able to connect. Maybe you have some databases here if you've used this before. If you haven't, you just run the database using Docker for the first time. It would be empty. Maybe you would see just this sys and performance schema databases here. But anyway, we are ready to connect to a database from Laravel. So open your application and find this .env file. Now what we are looking at here is the .env file, which contains the environment variables, and an environment variable consists of key and the value, and once this is loaded you will have those environment variables available with those specific names and the values. So the actual database configuration can be found inside database PHP file inside the config folder, and as you see here, it uses this env function to load the value of an environment variable. So you need to keep in mind that you won't commit this .env file to your source control, I mean to Git, as it contains secrets. So this is configured on your machine, but also on the production server separately. It's not part of the source code. Now, keep in mind that those .env files are actually fallback values. Normally, you would rather specify all those environment variables on the system. So they are specified on the system, but if the value of an environment variable can't be found on the system, then .env file is the fallback. So it's important to keep those values in the system and in the .env file in sync. Now, .env files are mostly useful locally while you are developing, so you don't waste time setting environment variables on your system. Instead, you just put them to this local .env file. Alright, so let's configure the database connection using those environment variables. So the first one specifies the connection, which is one of the connections defined inside the database PHP config file, one of those, SQLite, MySQL, Postgres, etc. So choose your database. Then you specify the database host, database port, database name, database username, and password. So we will be using MySQL, and the host should be localhost, as you see here, this specific address. Now keep in mind that when I used adminer, I typed MySQL as host. And this is because the adminer also works within a Docker container, and then the address of MySQL database was specifically MySQL, the same as the container name, but we are connecting to the Docker, to the MySQL running in Docker outside Docker. So for us, it's localhost. Now, this obviously only applies if you are using Docker to run MySQL. But if you are using tools like XAMPP or MAMP to run your MySQL database, most probably that's the localhost address under which the MySQL would be available. Now let me come up with the database name. So for me this would be Laravel 10 task list. And my username and password are both root. So make sure you provide valid credentials. I can't really check that for you, so you need to make sure that those are correct. So typically, root would be the username and password. Save changes, super important. Save changes to this file. And now let's open the terminal, stop the app if it's running, and run a command. This is php artisan migrate. Now, this command will change the schema using the so-called migrations, but I won't cover them in this video. They will be covered later. For now, let's just run this to see what happens and see if we can connect to the database at all. All right, seems that we have connected because it's asking us if we want to create a database because it doesn't exist. Yes. All right, so this has created a database for us and also run the migrations, which basically means creating some tables. And now I should be able to go to the database, which I don't really see here. Let me refresh. Maybe I need to log out and log in again. Yes, now I see it. So Laravel 10 task list, and it has created 5 default tables that Laravel creates by default. All right, so that's everything. We won't be going any further so far. We just had to connect to the database. So let me know if everything has worked for you, if you had any issues, or you need help with a different database, or something doesn't work on your system, just let me know.